But my mental health journey began definitely in high school. It's a time where, you're feeling like kind of edgy, kind of like rebellious, still trying to get to know your place in society. And at least for me, and I was still trying to get to know my place like in my family because I am the only child in my whole extended family and everybody has siblings. Part of me is like, oh man, they always have siblings or they have someone to play with. And I'm here like, I kind of have to learn how to entertain myself often because both my parents worked um, a lot. So a lot of the times, like I didn't know who to relate to because like I had friends, but it was a little tough to still like see who I fit in with because high school, especially like here in the Bay Area, specifically like Peninsula area, is predominantly white. So culturally, I couldn't systematically, it's a whole nother story, could not relate at all. And like, of course, it's never a sprint, it's always a marathon to always know more about yourself each and every day. That's my mentality is 1% better every day to know myself and to know what works for me, what doesn't work for me. So, and community college, there's a little bit of a stigma with community college, but honestly, that is the place where I blossomed and I bloomed and I understood like the oppressions of systematic racism and like that kind of like was a super healing moment because I'm like, oh shoot, like now I understand like some of it or maybe like a lot of it is not entirely my fault, so I shouldn't blame myself um, for situations that I can't relate myself to, or, yeah, so I will leave it at that. And yeah, definitely always a marathon, never a sprint, and to be forgiving to myself.
I think similarly, like my mental health journey also kind of began in high school, but it wasn't until like college when I was able to like finally name like the symptoms and like the certain things I was dealing with. I feel like just growing up like low income, like low SPS, like gave me a lot of like financial anxiety. Like I didn't really know too much about my financial situation until like my older sister, who's 2 years older than me, like applied to college. That's when I found out like, oh, like we're kind of like not doing like horrible, but like not as like comfortable as like I could see my other peers. And I feel like that gave me a lot of anxiety in terms of like comparing myself to like my friends and just like it's definitely like calmed down over time. But like when I moved to college and just like obviously I go to like elite institution like UCLA, like you're getting to meet a lot of people from different backgrounds, like vastly different backgrounds, and it was like very easy to be like I don't know. I think it's like I think I'm still valid in my feelings for like being upset knowing that like I didn't grow up with the same things, but like recognizing that like I didn't need those things to necessarily be happy. I feel like the pandemic has definitely like pushed my mental health like to its limits. I think a lot of it stems from like not to be like that sad boy simp, but I like experienced like the beginning of the pandemic was also when I like had my first like breakup and like heartbreak, and it was like my first relationship, but also like a queer relationship. There's a lot of things like embedded with that, and I feel like it was like very toxic, and like it was just like holding on to like just like growing up queer, you're always like, oh, like I'm supposed to, like this is how it's like supposed to feel. Like might as well like hold on to as long as I can, even if it's like very unhealthy and like a lot of toxic cycles. And I think it was just a lot of like anxiety thinking about like because also like it was like someone from like the same organization as me, like the Filipino organization. Oh my god, sorry, all this Filipino organization drama. It was just like a lot of anxiety, like navigating like, oh, like is this person like me, like our mutuals, like do they like me or not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just, just like feeling sad because a thing like that, like a big life transition, like a relationship is like, there's a lot of emotions process. And I feel like my first go to is like, oh, run away, avoid like my problems, my feelings. And it kind of like built up like honestly like a year and a half. And then it like came out and then a lot better now. But it was just like this past, like definitely this past like half year has definitely challenged me to like really prioritize like myself and like what Angeli said, like being very like kind to myself, compassionate, and like forgiving myself like for past things, and like recognize that like sometimes mental health can like get the best of you, but also like I don't know, it's like there's like a TikTok where it's like, this is my brain, I can think what I want. So like definitely challenging those like negative, unhelpful thought cycles and realizing that like, okay, I'm completely capable of creating like, more helpful thought patterns that will help me in the long term. So like Anjali said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I really wanted to jump in because a lot of what both of you had said kind of like resonated with me. And, I had come in initially, like when I like first saw the questions that we were going to be discussing, that as I was kind of thinking about my mental health journey, I like immediately thought to college, just because, college is a very like trying time. And I thought that that's where it really had started. And I think that's where like I truly started to want to learn more about my own mental health and like understanding how it manifests itself in others in my community and stuff like that. But when I really started talking about being an only child, like here, like I grew up here in Brooklyn in New York, in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So yeah, we had like Filipinos around in like Queens, but here in Brooklyn it's a very like scattered and small community, so there was nobody I could really relate to. So I love, Angeli, thank you for bringing it up, because like that's something that kind of like hit me when I was listening to you speak, just like how my upbringing was in that manner. And then like growing up isolated, alone, like parents are the only people from both sides of their family to be able to make it here. So there is definitely like a lot of pressure to be that first American born Filipino to succeed and just do everything. So yeah, that's definitely something that I think I've just like realized and pinpointed in my head. But I'd say definitely my like journey into mental health kicked up in college. Just kind of like the stresses of work and academia, especially here in the US collegiate system, and like having to deal with all these growing pains, relationships and like friendships and all of that stuff, forefront of like my thoughts once I had graduated in 2020, which was like at the height of the pandemic. And like just realizing how much pressure it was to like find a job straight out of college, but like the difficulty in doing so because of the pandemic, and like not feeling like I was doing enough and wanting to do more but not having the energy to. So that's definitely like how my mental health journey has been the last year or so. And I'm really grateful to be able to like share that with all of you and just kind of acknowledge it myself, as I'm still kind of learning more about me and more about how like I feel like in this like mental health space. So yeah, that's kind of my journey. And again, thank you for everyone for sharing, and really just like it hit home. So I really
I
appreciate.
want to say thank you for being also authentic about your stories. And it's it's kind of weird that even though I'm here in the Philippines and you guys, you're in the States, kind of feels like we're all going through this similar journey towards learning more about ourselves, learning how to love ourselves more, and being able to understand what our mental health really does to our bodies. And it's just, I don't know, it just is a really, it makes me feel so light that okay, I'm not going through this alone. A lot of people are actually going through it as well. And so I sincerely hope that you continue to share your stories, whether online or with the people that you meet, because you'll never know who can connect to your message, as I was connected to yours. So thank you so much for being so authentic. And for me, what started my mental health journey was also a heartbreak, similar um, with Pretty Patty. It all started with a heartbreak, and because I was really codependent with my ex girlfriend back then, everything I learned about basically came from her. So when she woke up one day, or when we both woke up one day and she didn't want any part of me anymore, I was really surprised. I didn't know how to handle it. And at that time, I was a naive, young, stupid kid. And, when a young, naive, and stupid kid would experience that kind of heartbreak, would experience his first heartbreak, I did what every naive, young, and stupid kid would do. I wrecked my life even more. So I didn't eat right. I didn't sleep right. I hated myself. I questioned everything. Basically, my identity was taken away from me when we broke up, and hit my lowest point. I became very anxious. I didn't I wasn't able to focus on my studies. I dropped out of college. I experienced a lot of panic attacks, and it was a really stressful time for me. It even came to a point where I basically, wanted to end my life. I said, I just can't handle it as I was planning it. Fortunately, it didn't push through, but it came to a point where, long story short, I was on the way to doing that. And my mother, I basically said that, okay, if I'm going to end this, I might just give life another chance, just one more chance, one more day. So I did just that and said, I opened my phone and then I saw all the messages, all the messages that people left me, because I already sent like goodbye messages. I said, okay, I'm gonna give it one more chance. So I opened it and I saw all the messages were flooding me. And then less than a minute until my mother was calling me, and she just basically said that, Alec, come home. When she said that, like, I broke down, like I snapped out of it. I said, what am I doing? This is wrong. So I went back. I went back home and then I hit the reset button. I said to myself that I need to take care of myself mentally as well, not just physically, not just financially and spiritually. Also, my mental health should be taken care of. So that was the moment that it started for me, when instead of me going to in the computer shops playing video games, I went to the library to study more about how our brain works. I studied about psychology, management, anything about self-improvement, basically. And as I was going through that, I got better. But I realized that there are a lot of people going through the same struggle, the same journey that I went through. And there are no people to remind them that it's okay to not be okay, that it's we're all in this together. We can get through it. You just got to keep going. It'll get better eventually. So I wanted to be that voice to remind them that no, you can actually do it. So that's the reason why I created a podcast, for people to have a safe space, to for them to be reminded that whatever you're going through, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. Your feelings are valid. And yeah, that's basically my story on how my mental health journey started. So
Wow. Well, thank you all for sharing your truth with us and just being vulnerable. I'm getting kind of goosebumpy here, just hearing your stories, because it's relatable to what I'm sure many are experiencing in this season of COVID, and a lot of people must feel isolated and anxious. So just thank you all so much for sharing. And I just really like what ambitious Alex said. When your mom texted you to go home, and you broke down crying, and then you basically had this reset button on your life, and you did the process of self inquiry. I think that if I could define what resilience means, I think that was kind of like a perfect example of it, because you hit your bottom, but you still decided to stand up your ground and go forth. So just thank you for sharing. Moving on, I wanted to transition. I think this is the perfect time to ask you about your best practices of giving yourself self love, self care, and how you manage your anxiety. Maybe we can start with.
So, ambitious Alec earlier mentioned that to take care of yourself spiritually. And I consider myself pretty spiritual. I am Catholic. I wouldn't say I'm like devout Catholic, but I do believe that there is a God, and spirituality is a big part of me. Of course, being Filipino, pretty sure y'all might have, right? Yeah, productive Patrick is like, yep, I feel it. So, yeah, I don't go to church like in person, but online, like I watch mass from the Philippines. If anyone knows Father Orbos, let me know. No. Father Orbos, you already know. So, I specifically love watching Father Orbos, and that's the first time I could say like confidently I enjoy watching mass, because like mass can get kind of boring, and especially if like the priest is not saying the sermon correctly and they're just like talking straight biblically. I'm not going to be able to relate to that, because it's not like 16 BC or something. It's like 2021. I can't relate to whatever the Bible is saying. So the priest has to translate it. So Father Orbis does that specifically in a way where it's relatable. He is truly authentic. Yes, Chachi is so authentic. I don't know if you watched this week's ceremony, but he talked about 6-12-6. So that means from 6 to 12, you intermittent fast from being angry and being frustrated. And like, if you feel like so anxious and frustrated and mad that you just want to like, you just have a lot of bottled up emotions. 6-12-6 is a reminder that for half the day, just try to pray, meditate, and abstain from those emotions. And then once it hits 12 p.m., go ahead and feel free to do whatever you want, like however you want to feel, like, And so to practice that, for me, at least, like, what's today? Now is like Monday. I heard that, I was like, okay, this is perfect, because as of recently, it is very difficult for me to handle my anxieties still living at home, like, and especially in like the same room from like literally 8th grade to like college now. I'm like still trying to find the middle ground of like, I'm an adult, but like still living with my parents makes me feel like a kid low key. So, it's difficult, but I understand that, and my dad has helped me too, that spirituality is the one thing that has helped me a lot, is finding something to ground my mind and like remind myself that let's just focus on today, like right now. I don't got to worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow is not for sure, it's not determined, and yesterday already happened, like there's no point in being like, oh, like I should have done this, or like, this should have happened. It's okay, like just let it go, like, you live and you learn, and you learn to live. So that is how I am coping: meditation, prayer, and Father Orbos.
But yeah, definitely like echoing what like Anjali said. I feel like definitely like taking it day by day. Definitely like just doing things that will like avoid like my triggers. Because I feel like just back then I wasn't necessarily like really mindful, and I would just do things that would like purposely like trigger me. I'm at that point where I'm just like, I don't care, not in like a hateful way, more in like a way that's peaceful to protect my inner peace. Because like obviously, I don't need to be caught up in like what they're doing and like who they're with, et cetera, et cetera. Like it doesn't, if it makes me feel kind of ways, if it makes me sick to my stomach, that's perfect. Like that's valid. But it's just like, okay, it's like up to you to like avoid. So I feel like setting those boundaries, like sometimes I don't want to unfollow people, I'll just like mute them. And I recently learned how to mute people on Instagram, because like you basically have to press like the following button. I was like, oh my God. I think yeah, definitely going to therapy starting this year has definitely helped like, untangle my other things that are keeping me from being like engaged in like the present moment, like what is preventing me from, just staying present. So often like, like when you feel depressed or like anxious, often because you're too worried about the past, or like you're too worried about like the future, but like recognizing that like these things are out of control. Like what can you do in the moment that is in your control? That like really prioritizes like your happiness, like your fulfillment.
I definitely do the same like best practices that Angeli and Pat had brought up already. But I guess just to add some more to our best practices pot, I would say for me, one thing I like to do is disconnect to connect. So what that means is that like when it hits a certain time over the weekend, or like, a certain part of the week where I feel like I'm overwhelmed, or, I just need to phase out a little bit, I'll disconnect. And meaning like I'll go off my phone for as much as I can. I won't really look at social media. I'll try to just like stay in like a regular headspace where, where I can go read, or I can just like enjoy this kind of disconnect time that I do have. I feel like we get so caught up in like the swing of things that we feel that we have to stay in that swing of things. But like, that power that we have to be able to just kind of like step back and just reevaluate and like other ourselves, I think it's like very powerful. So that's one of my best practices. And I'd say like, again, with taking it day by day, just to like add a different like channel to it, I would say that there's more to life than whatever like is affecting you at the current moment. Because for me, like personally, the last couple of months I've been so stressed out because I'm applying to law school in the next couple of weeks. So like it's been a lot of like studying for the exam and putting applications together, and like, there's definitely a lot of frustration that comes with like not getting the score that you want, or not like getting past a writing block for one of your personal statements and stuff. So like over the summer I really like had to take a step back and think, there's more to life than applying to law school, there's more to life than work and like being so stressed at it. And there's more to life than doing all of the other great work that everyone on this call is already doing, like, you know, nonprofit or organizing or what have you. So yeah, that's something that I like find like kind of solace in, where, you know, over the summer I've kind of just been enjoying the things that I had missed out on, that like I got so caught up, that I lost so much time on when I was like focusing like heavy on all of the law school stuff. So definitely like there is more to life than all of these stressors and anxiety and stuff. And like I think just finding those like small moments that like will make us feel like everything is okay. Like there's this movie, I don't know if y'all watched it, it's called About Time. It's with like Rachel McAdams and like I forgot the other guy's name. So basically like they have this power where like all the men in their family can go back in time and like relive their day. And then like yeah, definitely watch it, I definitely recommend it. But like one of the recommendations from the dad was that, you know, you have this power, try to, whenever you try to go back and repeat life, you know, take pride in like take some kind of like pleasure in the little things, you know, like you'll know that they're coming, but at least like, you know, you'll find joy in them. And sometimes we overlook the small things that make life so wonderful and so unique and so like joyful. So yeah, the little things matter. Disconnect to connect, and there's more to life. So yeah, that's my addition to the pot.
My best practices for my mental health. Of course, you go to the internet and you see all of these ways that you could, you know, protect or take care of your mental health. But what really worked for me was setting my boundaries and being clear with it and being strict with it. I Because I'm a very loving person. You know, I love this one person for like 11 years, and then now I don't have any person to love anymore. So I shifted that love, you know, not to give it to other people, but to give it to myself. And I learned that there are different ways that we could love ourselves. You know, we talk about understanding our partner's love language, but we could also apply that to ourselves. So for example, your love language is physical touch, then you could practice self-love by doing massages, taking long shower. If your love language is words of affirmation, you might do journaling, you know, acts of service, you might do organizing, all of that stuff. So you got to find what works for you. It's like there's different ways that you can take care of your mental health, different practices that you take care of your mental health. And so I figured now, okay, I really enjoy, you know, because I have this love language of physical touch. So I enjoy working out and taking showers and just being present with my body. That really worked out for me. And when I learned about that, I had to be strict with my boundaries. I had to say no to the things that, you know, disturbs my peace. I said to myself, I actually made a list of my the things that I will truly value moving forward when I'm taking care of my mental health. And I put number one there, it's my peace. So if anything disrupts my peace, I automatically drop them. Like I honestly believe that we can only say yes to the things that matter if we learn how to say no to the things that don't matter. So for me, saying no is a very, very important skill that we need to practice. Saying no, even saying no to, you know, social media. You know, Patrick said this. A productive Patrick, Patty said this. Like, you know, disconnect to connect. And so you got to learn how to say no to the things that really don't connect with your message or align with your values, so you could say yes to taking care of your mental health more. So that's what worked for me.
I'm just sitting in awe because what everyone said, there was a lot of great takeaways, and like I was taking notes actually, but one of the things that really stood out with everything is I'm sure that like you really did a great way of like putting everyone's um, responses together. So I wouldn't say more than that, but with that said, switching over to the main the main topic of the entire podcast. And the reason why I started with mental health first is because within our Filipino culture and community, we don't talk about mental health. And mental health is something that is so very easy, much taboo, that we don't really talk about it. And I feel like we should, since we are the most working and we always work, that we tend to forget to really take care of ourselves. We don't really take the time to um, like sit down and relax, because all in our mind is, I need to pay this bill, I need to pay this rent, or if I don't work, if I don't keep going, what if someone might call me out on something and like I'm gonna go down or something like that. But trying to like going on with it is, first and foremost, how do you understand your Filipino culture and identities? Because I don't think we heard everyone's experience on that.
Ooh, Chachi, that is a very good question. Everybody here is like thought bubbles. Like,
there's a lot of things to unpack understanding the identity of Filipinos, but for me, I think not only with the culture of the Filipino, I think the culture of the world, where we become more knowledgeable about things, because now we're all connected through the internet. And so before, there are certain practices or norms that we just can't accept anymore, because now we know better, because the information that we have right now is, it's at the tip of our fingertips. And then I just see the culture that we have. Well, speaking forward, because I can see from the culture, because I grew up in a very traditional household. My mom is the 10th of um 12 siblings. Back in the time, they didn't have anything, better to do. They just have fun and raise their children. And so I grew up in a very traditional way, where you need to go to college. Education is the only thing that we can pass on to you, and they're very strict with all these kinds of practices. But now I realize, because with the help of the internet as well, is that there are certain things that we need to adapt in order for us to just live in this modern era. So for me, I think there's a shift going on with the culture and the identity, but there are some core values that are still there. For example, resiliency is something that we really appreciate and admire with Filipinos, and not in like a toxic positive way, but more of like, don't no way to go but up. So for me, that's been my mentality that I think most Filipinos have as well.
Being born and raised here, like not just in Brooklyn, but like, in the United States and away from the home country, I think it's like we have a new identity that we like kind of undertake. So like, again, with the movie reference, there's this part in Crazy Rich Asians when like Rachel's talking with her mother, and then she's like, the way you look, it's like Chinese, and like, your blood is Chinese, but up here, you're not Chinese, right? And I feel that like kind of fits the description of how I feel I understand my identity. Like, by my looks and by the blood that runs through me, yeah, I'm Filipino. I'm full Filipino. My parents are both immigrants from the Philippines. But when it comes to like how I think, how I perceive things, there's definitely like some values that are some, traditionally accepted norms in the Philippines that I don't really like subscribe to, or, I just think way differently, being here in America and away from the home country. So I think like I'm learning every day about how my identity is like not just Filipinx, but like a combination of different things like around me, whether it's like my neighborhood here in Brooklyn, whether it's like the larger Filipino American community in the 50 states, or even like the global Filipino community. I think it's just like a whole learning process. And I think identity doesn't have to be something that's like set in stone. I think it's like something that naturally is fluid, like, like it changes based on where you are in your life, who you're around, and what kind of things you're exposed to. But I think that if you're true to that kind of like, if you're true to yourself and you understand like how your life is going, I think then that is when like you'll understand your identity best. Like I feel like we're always put into this bubble of like having to hear our parents or those that come from like the traditional Filipino upbringing about like there's certain values and how you have to be this, you have to be that. But like it's hard to like teach a fish how to climb a tree when it knows how to fish, like it's a different world for us. And I think that just undergoing this experience with all of you, and even Alec, even though he's like born and raised in the Philippines, I just like being in this era and this generation of so many young folks that are really like, we're exploring different aspects of our identity that haven't been, explored before because of like cultural or social norms in the Philippines, I think it's just a great experience for us to kind of find like that kind of solace and community. And so, yeah, still understanding it day by day, but slowly understanding it, and just grateful for the opportunity to understand it.
Negotiating like our Filipino American identity has a lot to do with like just like navigating like duality of being like both Filipino and American, like recognizing that like like what Patrick said, it's kind of hard to just be like, oh, I'm Filipino, because you don't necessarily like agree or like necessarily align with like all the values that people like who grew up in the Philippines with, but you don't necessarily like align with like people who are like like, if that makes sense, like straight up American, because like you have these Filipino background and like cultural values. And I feel like my experience, like in particular, is largely shaped by the fact that like I'm a first generation immigrant, but it's like more nuanced, unique than that, because like I moved to the US like when I was like only 3 years old. So obviously I like don't remember any of like my life in the Philippines like those 3 years. And just like obviously I grew up very Americanized since I moved here when I was really young. But it's just like I like saw firsthand how like just being a first gen immigrant really impacted the rest of my family. And just like so like I kind of spent my like entire life just being like, okay, like what those 3 years are obviously like super formative in my life. It's like how do I like reclaim that? Like, how do I take that back? Like, how do I remember? And like, obviously, my family and I would like go back, and like, I felt like the super deep connection. Like, this is my hometown. This is like where I'm from. Like, I'm from the Bay Area. Like, this is home. But like, when I think about the Philippines, I'm like, like that's like this is like my roots. It's not like the same thing as like as here in the Bay Area. And I feel like I was able to kind of fill that gap, like kind of through like the academic majors I chose. Like, I think I told everyone already that like I'm double majoring in Asian American studies, so getting like that perspective, and then my other majors like international development studies, so like getting like the global transnational perspective, and just being like, like where do I fit in like this diaspora kind of vibe kind of thing. And it's just like what Patrick said, it's like very fluid. I'm still like learning a lot more, and just like honing in more so on like the fact that I am and like Filipino American, but my experience is very unique given that I am a first generation immigrant, but also moved here when I was super young. So I'm just like constantly trying to like reclaim and like remember those first 3 years, while also like negotiating that like, hey, can't fully stand Filipino because I have a lot of these like American influence, a lot of these like that very like individualistic mindset that's like still trying to unlearn and trying to like decenter myself and more so center like my family, like my community, and like just be more like collectivist.
I'm learning so much right now just from that one question, because I literally was like, I don't know my Filipino identity, like honestly, because like it's different when you're like Filipino American, because like what Patrick said, productive Patrick, you're like,
and I think identity doesn't have to be something that's like set in stone. I think it's like
you're like
something,
it's like a whole different mindset, like versus if you're born and raised in the Philippines, there's different cultures and different like traditions. And I was like, oh gosh, like where do I fit? Because I want to go back to the Philippines and like learn from there, but at the same time, like Pretty Patty, I love the Bay Area. I love the culture, how diverse it is. There's so much like different communities you could just pop in and out of. And that's what I kind of now understand, like literally tonight, is that it's a whole accumulation. It's like a beautiful accumulation, like a pretty bouquet of like, this is me and this is me. But in general, overall, like I am my own identity, and it is very fluid, like what you said. So I love that. I'm gonna put that on my wall to be honest, like as a reminder. Struggling with trying to understand it for a while and trying to see where I fit. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And I resonate with you a lot on not knowing where you kind of stand, because I know that Alex, you're born and raised in the Philippines, whereas Productive Patrick, you're born and raised in the US, right? But like for me, I left the Philippines when I was 7. So I still know the language, but then after I left the Philippines, I started traveling all around different countries like Singapore, Brazil, and then I lived around the US. So it's really trying to find out who I am in the different spaces that I'm in. Like, you're not gonna find so much Filipinos in Rio, but in Singapore there's a big Filipino community. But the ways that they interact or the ways that they see themselves as Filipino is completely different than how the ones here in Hawaii. So I think just to kind of share my own experience, like I'm also figuring out what is my identity and like building it as I go. So thank you all for sharing. Going along that, Chachi, do you want to share? I want to hear your story.
I guess like everyone mentioned here, like it's really nice because we are when I read the doc prior, I saw that one, two, three, four of us is actually both were born in the Philippines, and I didn't know if anyone was born from the States, but like now finding out that we're like, and then but we all have different experiences, like especially with for me, I came to Hawaii when I was 7 as well, 7, 8 years old. And during that time, just being in Hawaii, I still didn't know much about like my like the entire Filipino because I grew up with it. So just like it's just part of who you are. I guess it really does change. I think I'm gonna put that in like a t-shirt or make that as a sticker, productive Patrick, because actually that's really good. Um, but yeah, your identity truly does shape their experiences because coming to Hawaii at a young age, I just came here like with the knowing of like what I was when I was in the Philippines, and now that I'm here and like with all the different things that I've learned, there's so much more nuances with being Filipino that I didn't know before. But the more you learn, the more you know. But for me, I think it's it's really like really great to be in this space, and like hearing different experiences because you never really um, know unless you really ask that question firsthand. So once again, thank you for like being open and being honest. And like I really appreciate also everyone's answers, especially trying to like echo what Alex said. Because being in the Philippines, I know and understand what you meant. Like being surrounded by in all predominantly all Filipino, like you don't really talk a lot about your identity as much because it's something that really does flow and like how your environment does really shape you.
I would say just to add in, just like hearing everyone's like great stories, I think also like the other thing is that being Filipino American isn't a monolith. Like there are different experiences that Filipino Americans in Hawaii and like in the Bay Area and SoCal and in the Midwest and here on the East Coast like experience. So there's so much more to like dig through and kind of like, and I think this is great that like whether it's through Epic or like spaces like this, we're able to learn from one another. So yeah, there's definitely lots more to unpack and stuff. So thank you for opening up. Like I'm definitely gonna like as soon as we get off this call, I'm just gonna like do some more deep digging and just thinking because like this is truly a lot, but like it's really opening my eyes to like the great depth of like the Filipino or our community here and in the Philippines and just how like yeah how that whole relationship is. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, everyone. And I guess we'll go to our last question. It's kind of a two-way question. How do we unpack the stigma of mental health and bring this conversation into our family?
A running joke around Gen Z about how like you either move out and just like your mental health suffers because like financially you can't support yourself as much versus like staying at home. Obviously you're saving money, but like your mental health deteriorates. And I definitely like I'm more so on the latter aspect because I'm like after college I'm gonna move back home because I'm like I said, low income and I'm like I do not have the like resources to support myself like to live like outside of my family. And like I definitely like experience like the deterioration of mental not so much because I feel like I'm very fortunate to have like a very good relationship with my family. But there's like definitely some days where I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna lie down in bed all day or lie down on my couch because I feel a little bit depressed and like it's like I definitely recognize that like when people say like mean things or like things like out of pocket, not out of pocket, like like it's definitely them projecting or like them just like not being aware of like how their words can impact others. Like so when my mom like calls me lazy, I'm just like, mom, like this is how like I feel right now, and like I've definitely confided in her about like my mental health struggles and like tell her like, oh, I go to therapy and like this I'm going through right now because of the pandemic, my like breakup and heartbreak. But it's like, you know, there's like that generational difference, like that knowledge difference, and it's hard. It's kind of hard to like meet your parents there. So I feel like bringing that conversation to your family. I think it's just, well, obviously you have to like build rapport and like build that trust. And I recognize that not everyone has that kind of relationship with their family. But I think for me and my mom, able to like, you know, build that bridge. It's like I really just like had to show her that like, you know, like I'm really struggling. And like I think it was like like winter quarter, like around March, like I like called her and I was just like, you know, saying some like really extreme things and just like being like very emotional. And like I like personally never like I grew up, I don't know if y'all know too much about astrology, but basically I grew up in a house like none of us like were water signs, like none of us were emotionally intuitive and in touch. So it was just like being able to cry like that in front of my mom, like she like that's when she knew it's like this through like this is like me struggling. And I think it's just like I don't like make because obviously like mental health is like very like invisible and like it's kind of hard to like you need to know and distinguish. So I feel like I had to like make it visible that okay, this like I'm struggling, just like you know, it's super hard to like articulate what you're going through like mentally and emotionally, but it's just like finding ways to do that like to your family and recognizing that like, you know, it's I feel like it's also hard to like confide in them about that because, you know, like I said, like we're very collectivist and like a lot of things about like hiya and stuff and just like I feel like a lot of parents will take it like as like a personal responsibility, like, oh, like I did so much, you know, to move here to the US and provide a good life for you. Like, was that not enough? But it's just like recognizing that like, you know, this is like my brain, but also like there's like I think you mentioned at the beginning, like there's systemic factors that are literally like making our life harder, like not just me, but also like my parents and like they're acting upon us both and like recognizing that my mental health struggles are not well sometimes because of family, but you know, like primarily due to like systemic things that are literally out of our control. So yeah, just like making mental health more visible and just like really speaking to like these systemic things and like just like meeting them in the middle, like where they are, because like obviously we have different bases of knowledge.
So funny. Sorry, I just had to butt in. A lot of what you were saying, I was like, yes. Especially when you mentioned how like Gen Z people have this struggle of like one leaving your family and struggling with your mental health because of financial struggles, or staying in your home and struggling like mentally because of like toxic household. Oh my god, that's funny, but it's not funny because it's true, but it's funny because it's true.
Oh my gosh. When you were like, I am a water sign and no one is water signs in my family, I was like, I feel that. I'm a Cancer sun sign, but my rising is a Leo. So even though I am in touch with my emotions per se, I do like stick my ground and like I know what I want essentially. But I totally feel you, pretty Patty. However, when you mentioned that not everybody's relationship with their family is the same, and where you're at is my goal right now. I am trying to. There have been times when literally my mom has come to me and she's like, "How come your Lola is like this?" And she's like trying to like understand things, and I'm over here like, I'm still trying to heal me. Like I wish I can like help you and I want to help you. Um and it's just I gotta feed my plate and I gotta make my heart whole before I can like give you some of my love and like, try to help you out. However, I do try to help her out and be like, you just gotta be patient and be loving and stuff like that. But yeah, like to start off is like I would say I would say is like understand. For me it was that they had their own journeys and before they had me they were their own people. Like they had their own upbringings, they had their own experiences. And that idea was healing for me because I didn't understand, like I just knew only child, like I'm their kid, and like I felt like I was responsible for their feelings and I was responsible for like what they're doing, and stuff like that. So like it's difficult for me to express my emotions at home in a way where I know that I will be met with support rather than like shame and like, you know, mental health is like not real, or it's like, you know, just like suck it up, you know. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And so starting small, but being persistent, that is how I'm doing, and trying to forgive myself and forgive my parents that it's not their fault either, you know. So yeah. Oh, my dad's a Taurus, by the way, so he helps me a lot because Cancers and Taurus, like, yes. If you know anything about astrology, but yeah.
Yeah, I wanna add on to that. I think it's really hard to bring, this conversation, especially here in the Philippines. Like, we don't think, I think in the US we've seen progressive, approaches or conversations surrounding mental health, but here in the Philippines we don't even want to talk about it. Like, of course, in our generation, and the Gen Z and millennials, they'd like to talk about it, but the boomers, they don't want to talk about it. They don't think that it exists, and they don't want to acknowledge it. And for me, I'm very blessed that I have a mother that would listen to me. And at first she was also resistant to these new ideas, to mental health. And I couldn't blame her, because basically it's not her fault that she couldn't understand these concepts. She was raised that way. That's why she was closed on these concepts. So for me, I shifted my focus on, maybe, if I could just show you that, these are really important things. And I think I'm really blessed that, when I went through what I went through, she basically saw now, okay, like, these issues exist. So now she's more open-minded to that, although she's a little bit hesitant to understand all the concepts about it. But now we can talk about it more. So I think the only way that, there are certain families that you can only show them how important mental health is if you show them by example. If you're really teaching this or sharing this, or this is really important to you, not just sitting down and having that talk. Sometimes that does not work. And for me also, I'd also like to share this, that if I cannot convince, like, the older people that mental health is important, I would just like to say to myself, that I'd remind myself that even though I can't convince them, it is my duty make sure that the stigma ends here. So I try my best to teach the young people, the next generation, or in my generation at least, that we need to talk about these things. Maybe our parents, they won't be able to understand this for the rest of their lives, but that's okay. We shouldn't take it personally. It's not their fault that they can understand this, but it's we have a better understanding than they have. So let's do better now. So let's try to break that stigma here.
Definitely heavy on Alex's last point. Like, definitely, I think it's definitely our kind of like duty, or our job rather, to kind of like continue this discussion, like, with our generation and beyond, just because we, like, us as like a generation, have realized how important it is. I mean, personally, I'm fortunate enough to like have parents that, are like, they're open-minded, and as Alec kind of mentioned, they're beginning to kind of like understand the topic of mental health through, like, not specifically me, but like individuals in our like Filipino family friend circles. And like, me explaining it to them is helping them to kind of understand, which, I'm very fortunate to be able to be in that position to kind of have that dialogue with them. But yeah, like, I think it still goes back to like each day is a process, because there's definitely like people in this Filipino like circles that like will say therapy in a hushed whisper tone to this day, like they'll think of it as a taboo. So definitely just continuing that conversation is like so important. And I think it's definitely on us to just continue to like push this conversation forward. And yeah, hopefully we can like one day go to a Filipino party and just be able to talk with whoever is sitting there about mental health, or like, not having to be like, damn, I don't want her to find out because she's gonna tell everybody, they're gonna talk about me and then all of that. So yeah, that's the goal. So hopefully we'll get there one day.
Yes, definitely. It starts with us, like what we said in the chat. What Angeli said, we're here to break the stigma. It really does starts with us, and I think um, prior to ending off our last time ever meeting each other ever again, my last question is, what is one thing that you would take away from this conversation? And yeah.
I honestly had like a really great like past weekend. Like I was able to go to a concert with like my hometown friends and like what is it? Like we've all been like my friends and I have all been through some shit. Like we've been since with each other since day one through like our dark days, like our problematic phase, like our cringy phases. And it's just like really nice to like see the growth. But it's like we wouldn't have gotten here if we like never reached out for like support. Because I feel like our friendship kind of died down because of like not just the pandemic, but also like we all went away for college, like different places. So like the pandemic kind of brought us together since we all had to move back home and just like reconnect and just being like, hey, like I'm struggling, like we need to support each other more, kind of, that makes sense. And I feel like this kind of reminded me that like, you know, you're never alone in like your struggles and just like we are like tied together, not just like being Filipino, but like are also like our struggles. I feel like I really identified with like Alec's story and like and how heartbreak can be like very all encompassing. And it just like offered me like a lot of reassurance because thankfully like we're both on the other side, but it was just like, you know, recognizing that the struggles and like everything that was going through my head like back then was so valid and just like I wouldn't have gotten there, like gotten to this point now if I didn't reach out for support like you guys have. And it's just like, you know, just very reassuring knowing that like these past struggles aren't like definitions like of us. Like we can use them to like, you know, like offer insight and experience like other people who may be going through the same things and just like, you know, recognizing that like struggle, it sucks, but it really like I feel like it's like one of like the strongest like bonders of like among people, if that makes sense. Like being able to be so vulnerable like in these spaces like this and just like connecting with people through those struggles and shared experiences is really nice and reassuring. So
I would say a takeaway from this conversation would be the value of kapwa, at least what I've learned for sure. Um, what I've learned in my Philippine class was that kapwa is like um, synergetic. It's reciprocal. It's whatever you give, you receive. Not necessarily karma, but like a part of me is a part of someone else, and they are also a part of me. So I know that our struggles are tied together. I feel hella supported right now, and like I know that everybody here is going through their struggles in ways where other people can definitely find um, support and like healing and connection. So tonight's conversation was A1. And yeah, COP was my takeaway from everything.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you emphasized on, having this intersectionality between all of us. And I honestly believe that all the experiences that we go through, the more personal it is, the more universal it becomes. And so we may come from different backgrounds, we may have different stories, but it's basically the journey towards becoming better, taking care of ourselves better, a journey towards self-love and self-improvement. We're all in this same boat, right? And I also just want to share that hearing different stories, I think you have a very amazing platform here where people could just share their stories and their struggles as well, because I believe that in every struggle that we overcome, it can basically become our strength, and not just our strength, but also the strength of the people who can hear the stories that we've overcome. So the struggles become our strengths, and basically the pain points become our purpose in life, in helping others, in reminding others that it's okay, that it's a safe where we're creating this new safe place where we could be our most authentic self and just express our emotions as it is. So I definitely love this conversation that we had. I hope we could continue this type of conversation, whether online and offline as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and just to like, I guess, continue in that same thread, I think like my biggest takeaway is that there is immense comfort in community. And like, this is definitely like my first time like openly discussing about like mental health. It's like it impacts on me. So like, I'm grateful to be able to share that experience with all of you. It's been very eye-opening, but I think like the best part about this was like everyone has kind of like alluded to already, like just mentioning our shared experiences and struggles and how like we're all in this process of like collective healing, collective growing, and I just love that. So thank you for this space. I'm eternally grateful, and I definitely hope, like as Alec mentioned, to continue to doing this work together with all of you, and to continue to work on myself, because you know there's definitely a lot to unpack and still learn there. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Yes, thank you all so much. Healing really starts within ourselves. Self inquiry is so important. And I just want to end our Kwentuhan session by thanking all of you for being so vulnerable and really sharing your truth, not just to our intimate 6 people, but to whoever's listening right now. I hope that and get the same takeaways that many of us got, and find comfort in knowing that you're not alone. So I hope you all learned something new just as much as I did, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye.